you all who are here. Thanks for coming to the today. I just prepared some slides for you to get through this commentary that I'm going to do on the caste system. So that we get to know about it a bit more better, whether it exists or whether it does not exist. We will go through the main salient points of what is caste, where does it come from, and how does it actually operate in our lives today, whether it operates or doesn't operate as much as it did 100 or 200 years ago, from where, especially a person like me, I'm an Indian, and this is also a community where a lot of rituals who came here in the early days during the Malacca Sultanate society. They too carried along with them an identity of caste and caste surname. And so let's get on with it. Okay. This is the current scientific hypothesis of the out of Africa route, where all of us came from. Though all of us have got different skin tones, different body sizes, different cranial structures, how we look, how our skulls are physically. Right? We pretty much came from an area right about here. This near Red Sea, Ethiopia. We were somewhere around here in Namibia, right? And we have been able to trace, not through language, not through the way that we look or the food that we eat, but simply by the book that we carry with us, which is our blood, right? Our DNA. So through DNA analysis, what scientists have been able to find is that each one of us has a marker, right? Especially from our mothers, right? The Y chromosome, right? The Y chromosome is always something that we carry on, no matter what generation we go through. And this are the first. We are very diverse population in Namibia. This I call the Khoisan tribe, right? If you remember the movie Gods Must Be Crazy, they featured these people. These are basically, technically, these are the living humans currently in Namibia who became our ancestors 70,000 years to 80,000 years ago. Alright, they still live there. Nothing much has changed. They're still hunter-gatherers. Right? They don't have technology. Not much actually. A bit of technology. They have some metals and all that which has been given to them by Africans and so on. But they pretty much have stayed like the orang asli in our jungles, Semangs. You see in Malaysia, we also have such people called the Semangs, orang asli. They also carry that particular gene associated with them. So that's 70,000 years, about 85 to 70,000 years ago. Alright? With the Ice Age period and areas of Africa becoming a bit more less inhabitable because of lack of food and the destruction of foraging grounds, the tribe made a straight walk across to this point here, right near Ethiopia, and this tribe basically had the bravery to take the next step, which is cross that thin area near the Red Sea, right? And probably a lot of sea crossings. When people cross the sea, that will be found in a lot of older texts, from different cultures about the Red Sea and how the Exodus happened. Right? So this was kind of an exodus that happened 75,000 years ago when they crossed that and went into Saudi Arabia, what is now Saudi Arabia. Although it's now desert, but most of it is most of it was a very fertile area, and from there they made it to the rest of the world. Right? So this is where we are now, Malaysia, and we came from different areas of the world. The Chinese from China, the Indians from India, the Portuguese from Portugal, and so on. Right? And they managed to go right up to Australia, where they still are, the aborigines. Okay? And in the early days, this area here, it was called a Sunda slate, all connected together. Even Borneo and Malaya were connected together. So if you're wondering how elephants made it across the ocean, it was because there was a land connection about 10,000 years ago with the ice age melting. You had all these areas cut off. So pretty much we were also connected with Sumatra many years ago, tens of thousands of years ago. Okay? So this again, why we're coming to this point, because we want to see how India got populated. There was nobody in India at the time except for prehistoric man, which is the Neanderthals and the older tribes. We are Homo sapiens, right? And this is basically the tribes in India, how they would have looked in the early days when they resided in India. There has been one gene found in South India, and the gene is called M130. Right, and it was found in a guy from the Devar class or a Devar caste, right? Of course, you'll see in a short while, right? And with this distribution and with exposure to a lot of different environments, food, right, cultures, and intermarriages between different tribes, you have today the diversity of different places, different peoples. Right? And this differentiation is what brought about mainly the caste system. Right? People want to differentiate themselves due to skin color or language or practices. Right? Something to do with culture or the way what they believe in. Right? If you believe in a different God, I don't want to join you. Or if you eat something different, I don't want to join you because I'm different. You know, it still goes on, you know, in life today. Now, what do you find common among all these 6 people? Huh?
No.
Yeah. This is a person from the San tribe. This is in South America. This is right up there, the Chukchi people. Right up at the North Pole. Right, sorry, this is Central Asian, Chukchi, which is not up, like this is more Kazakh, right? This is South American, Aborigine, Tamil, South Indian, right? All of them share the same gene, right? The gene M130, showing that at one point in time, 75 years ago, all of them came from the same great grandmother, 1,000 generations ago. 1,000 generations ago. Not 3 or 4, 1,000 generations ago. So if you see, through mutations in genes and so on, people have changed the face colors, the way they look, the nose sizes, the way their teeth look, right? Different types of food that produces which is used for different kinds of environment, whether you're eating soft fruits or eating meat and so on and so forth. Right? That's the genetic diversity that you have. Alright? It all started, right? This first civilization, as people travel around, there was not much civilization, most of them were hunter-gatherers, still like the Orang Asli or the San tribe. Then you had the first civilization, we know today, which is the Mesopotamian civilization. Right? You had the Nile civilization, which was in Egypt, the Mesopotamians. Generally, everybody was black everywhere, black or brown. Right? Around the civilizations, everybody was black or brown because the originators of that were somewhat in that color. Right? Different tribes came, not only one tribe, but different waves of people came through. And after this was in 3000 BC. 3200 BC, which is about 5200 years ago. Right? This was a civilization called Mesopotamia. Right? It was in this area. So they had traveled along Saudi Arabia, down here. This was Saudi Arabia at the bottom, and up along the coastal route. And since they took the coastal route, they settled here at a very fertile river basin, right? Where they engaged in agriculture. So people have already begun to settle down and start to do agriculture, right? With agriculture, this is where the beginnings of social stratification started, which means you divide people into different groups of, maybe you had the guys who only did cow herding, you only had people who were planters, right? So jobs and specializations were created in order to control society or to maintain peace and order within the society. So everybody is working towards a common goal, right? And this is where the first civilization, major civilization happened. From this is the Sumerians and all of that, and finally they went to the Indus Valley. Alright? This is where again a lot of things happened relevant to what we want to talk about caste. So why we went through this entire, we are going through this entire 6 or 7 slides about human evolution, because we need to know that at the beginning everything was from one single source, from a group of people, about 600 people to 700 people. There was a bottleneck, people were dying. Yeah? So they managed to cross this point, go through all the coastal routes, come up, right, and ended up here. Alright, that is about 70,000, and by the time they reached here, it was only about 5,000, 60,000 years had passed. And most of them didn't stop to do agriculture. They just went on, walked and walked and walked. Beachcombers. They walked along the beach and they went along. So this was the major civilization, the Indus Valley. And from the Indus Valley, you had people disseminating to different areas. You had also from here going upwards towards the north. Right? You had also had from this point Egypt and people who went this way. So the whole area was already populated with different groups of people. Okay. And this is how it was at that time, Mesopotamia, and also the Indus Valley civilization. They already had boats. They were traveling along the beach, and if you see, they used to travel from point to point because the boats could not move very far. Yeah, as they traveled from point to point, what you had was small townships along the way, and this was between 3200 BC and 3200 to about 1700 BC. About 5000 to about 3000 years ago. Alright, so you had two civilizations here called the Harappan and the Mohenjo-Daro civilization. Right? What were the Mohenjo-Daro people and Harappan people like? Now we have only a bit of clues from what they have left back. There are no books or CDs or anything like that. It's just carvings. The Indus Valley civilization was between the Middle East, and here there were more of the older group of foragers. Yeah, they were what you would say as the natural people of the land. This was a bit more civilized. Okay, and here you have the bust or the statue of a priest king. So they had a king on the top, and most of it looks very Sumerian, Babylonian, right? So there is a possibility. Most of what we're going to be talking about today are possibilities and suggestions, not definitive, because even in India, we have not found a definitive answer to caste or where the civilization came from due to lack of evidence. So although excavations are continuing, we have got new evidences to show or to even strengthen the suggestion that what could have happened at this point. Right? So they were oxen driven. If you see all of the statues, you will see the oxen, right? The Brahma bull, which was a very important part of their lives. They used it as a beast of burden. Yeah, this is the Indus Valley civilization. They were not Hindu. Hinduism has not started yet. So this is not the seat of Hinduism. Hinduism is more of a collection of different cultures which came about and combined into one, right? And so you have and because it was available, they ate. They ate beef, they ate the cow, they ate the calf. They were meat eaters anyway. They were also grain eaters. Very peaceful culture. If you see, they engaged in a lot of art. So they had a lot of free time. Okay, a very peaceful culture, free time. And if you look at what they built, this was how their city was. Right? It's like a modern gated compound, gated city, or a gated housing estate. Although it was much more simpler in design, it was functional for that time. They had drainage. They had a system of grid. Okay? So this was very interesting because 3,000 years ago, you had a society based on economic equality and social egalitarianism. Yeah? It's more of a primitive communist society which believed that everybody should be equal. Right? So you don't see in the Indus Valley civilization a really great big temple like the pyramids or in Sumeria. Right? There is no worship, right, of people. So you had a priest king to make everybody, you have a leader, right? Every society will have a leader who will then advise them or face enemies when they have to. And this is again because of what we have excavated, what they have excavated in terms of jewelry, musical instruments, toys especially. There were a lot of toys, children's toys, right? And when you see that, then you understand that it's a very peaceful culture. You have a lot of people's agrarian culture, not a war. People who go to war, they don't plunder, they plant their own food, they harvest their own food, right? And from this, we are able to see that they had a high level, of social values in terms of production. Right? So they didn't have to go out of the gates to go and hunt. So out of the gates was dangerous, right? Because you would be meeting a lot of other tribes, other races. So the walls were to keep invaders out, right? And the real people of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa in. But one of the problems was, again, you had the annual flooding of the area, through which they were able to, for some time, for about 1,000 years or 1,500 years, they were able to control. River Indus and the river Saraswati was flowing through the land to make it very fertile. Okay? But at some point, before 1700 BC, you had a tectonic or an earthquake which actually caused the river to change its direction. And when that happened, they had no water in the river, and you had non-arable land. The land couldn't be used for planting. Right? So this would be a statue from Mohenjo-Daro, and if you notice, it's very African in nature. If you see the bangles, and all of that, and the facial structure. These are the toys for the kids at the time. And this was a city, pretty much like a modern city that you can see today. The way that they planned the city, you had a central bar, you had toilets as well. That's 5,000 years ago. So sanitation, bathing, cleanliness was a very important part of this culture, right? There were no more nomads, dirty, or everybody was clean. They had a very, very advanced system of sanitation and health. But so everybody was taken care of. The level of happiness probably in this area was very, very good. These are the ruins today. You see what they had. It's a very flat. It was a very flat design, right? Somewhere around 1700 after they had left, you had the Aryan migration. Now the term Aryan is where it all starts, because it is said the caste starts, or social differentiation or stratification starts at this point, where you have the priests, the Kshatriyas, and so on. Yeah? So you have, this is where India is. You had several waves of people going through. And this is between 1700, between this year's 10,000 BC to 2000 BC. They were just coming out of this area and invading the areas here. Due to the ice age fleeting, and most of them are not able to have arable land, and they wanted to go down, further down, to seek pastoral zones. And you had a clash of civilizations. The Aryans were a warrior race, right? They were a warrior race, and basically they had horses. Horses, this was a very flat land, and they are the first to tame horses. So if you want to see the difference between the Indus civilization and the Aryan civilization, the differences is in the beast of burden that they use, which is one, the Indus civilization used the oxen, or the cow, or the bull, and the bull was very slow. Yeah? They had a very large cart, which was almost about half a ton, 500 kilograms, right? And you had these Aryans were coming down who had chariots on horses, right? They were going on with horses. As they went through and started up and went into the Indo-Gangetic plains, they started up a synthesis of two different religions, one of the Aryans and the other of the Indus Valley civilization, which has moved from this part here, which was not arable, into the Indo-Gangetic plain, which was more arable, and you had the Ganges, which was at the end. Today we find that among Hindus, the Ganges is the most sacred river, and that was established about 1000 BC. Now the synthesis between these two cultures brought about the Rig Veda, the Mahabharata, and a few other books, Upanishads, and so on. And this would be again the basis where Jainism, Buddhism, and so on would emerge as either anti-Brahmanism, which is Buddhism and so on. They had an anti-Brahmanism movement, right? And you had a synthesis between two cultures. Any questions so far? Okay, not only were these areas, was India quite divided in the early stage, you had everybody coming through. You had the Greeks, you had the Persians, everybody was coming in from all over and occupying the northern zone, right? And India was never a single country, it was many countries on a single subcontinent, okay? What we see India today is more of the creation of the British. Okay? India was various countries, different people, different tribes, conquered different areas and named their areas differently. Right? Not what you would see in India today. So when people came in, you had intermarriages, cross-cultural marriages, which resulted in a lot of crossbreeding. And if you look at India's history over these years, these are the dynasties that ruled India. Different types of people. You had the Mauryans, you had the Persians, all of them walked through the northern part of India, and with this walking through, you had a lot of cross-fertilization of people. Most of them didn't go much to the south because India was pretty much divided by the Vindhya mountains, right up to this point when the East India Company, this was the last people to have conquered India, unified it, right, for about 200 years, and then they were the ones who gave India the independence and created this nation called India, right? Same with Malaya, as we will know later, why did Indians come to Malaya? Now, if you look at people here, the northerners, so you have certain characteristics of people. So you have Afghanians, these are natives of Iran, this is Pakistan, and this is India. So most of them ended up in the film industry, okay, because they look good, right? Nobody liked the black skin, right? And you see a lot of pictures of gods or goddesses, they are always white. Very seldom you see black unless you go down to south of India. So there was always a color divide between the two divisions of people, and it was pretty much a very comfortable agreement to stay where they are, stay put where they are, because it was a vast subcontinent. Any questions here? Right? So if you look at this, the skin color, first we have the skin color divide, which the Aryans in the early part stratified into classes. So they had the white class and the darker skin, right? So most of you here have got different skin tones, right? So if you see the northern part of India, with all of the invasions or cross-cultural reference, cross-cultural migrations that were happening, you have a different set of people. Yeah? You see Bollywood. Bollywood is somewhere here, not up here. This is not Bollywood, right? This is North India. Bollywood is somewhere at the West Bank here. Okay, but of course people migrated to these points here. The middle is a bit of a mix of both, and right at the bottom of India you have darker skinned people who are the original people of South India. Right? So of course skin tone changes accordingly when you are more closer or you are exposed to more UV rays as in the equatorial zone. Right? Okay, so what we see today in India, why do you see Bollywood, why do people prefer Bollywood than movies in Tamil or Telugu and all of these different dialects? Is because you have good looking people who almost look like Hollywood stars, and Malaysia was a very long time fan of Hindustani movies. Yeah. Also you have the language divide. So you have the Proto-Indian language, or whatever language that was created on the Indian continent, which was Proto-Indo-European, which was where they all came from, the chariots as well as the Aryans from the steppes of Russia. And then you had Tamil, right? Tamil, they generally call it Tamil. We call it Tamil because of the Indian English accent. From Tamil, this is called a Dravidian branch, which is Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada and Telugu. So if you look at where it is in India, it is all here in the green zone, right? And all other languages, Sanskrit had a lot of Sanskrit and Tamil had a bit of crossover during the later days. It is said that also the Indus Valley civilization spoke a type of Proto-Tamil, and if you see the Proto-Indo-European languages became the Iranian, the Slavic, Germanic and other different languages, right? So we are divided by language, we are divided by skin tone, right? And this generally changes everyone's culture, the way that you eat, the food that you eat, for example, right? because of the nomadic culture, the northerners normally, you see, you had a distinctive feature of their food. How many of you have taken naan? Naan, all of you know about naan, tandoori. If you see the type of food that they eat, it's always burnt in a fireplace. Whereas in the south, it's more curries, more liquid. You know? The reason is because they are a river culture, right? They were always a river culture in which the base of their food was water, right? And spices. So they had time to sit down. Let's say you want to cook rice at home, it takes at least about 2 hours, right? To prepare your food and so on, and to start doing, to cook a curry, for example. It takes at least 2 to 3 hours, right? From preparation to the end. Whereas in the northern culture, because they were very nomadic, they just had wheat, they did threw it in the fire, immediate take and eat. Because they need to move. They were moving. Alright, so moving people got no time to sit down and grind spices and so on. They mixed their meat with milk or curd or whatever they had and threw it in the fire. The fire would then burn the food, and then when you eat, you will have a different way of cooking. Right? Whereas the Indians had pots and pans, they had water, they boiled the food, a higher degree of sanitation was practiced. Okay, so even as a device, even in food culture, you have certain technologies that came about because of long terms of civilization. Right, now we come to the Indian caste system. Now, along with the synthesis, the Rig Veda, the books, the holy books, the so-called holy books of the Hindus. At the time when it was created, there was no Hindu, right? Hindu comes from the word river Indus. That was when Western archaeologists during the 19th and the 20th century went in to investigate, and decided to name it the Indus civilization because of the Indus River, right? And that caught on, and they were, I mean, the British are very fond of this kind of labeling, and it became the religion of the Indus, or Hinduism. Now there was, this is the basic, what you will find everywhere if you are going to research about caste. At the top you had the priests. The priests are not people that you see in temples nowadays. Right? They're not priests as, doing some penance and throwing some flowers and so on. This would be a legion or a group of intelligentsia, philosophers, people who knew how to manage people. Right? What you see today is like the parliament, but much more smaller, like a council of elders, you see. Right? Who were intelligent enough to know a lot of things. When you were chosen, or basically got into that group, they called priests. Right? Then you had the Kshatriyas, right? The Kshatriyas were the main guys who came in from the Aryan civilization and placed themselves in the group because they wanted to have some power. And of course, the chief Kshatriya would be the king who would represent the god. So the Indus Valley civilization had black gods, right? Black colored gods. Krishna, for example, a prototype of Krishna. You had Shiva. Right, so their gods would be always black. Whereas the Aryans brought in different types of gods, pantheons from their culture. Indra, the god of thunder, sky, rain. Okay? And Agni. Because these were nomadic people, to them the fire was very important. So today, even if you go to a temple and see, witness a Hindu wedding, the fire that you go around, that is Agni, the witness of Agni, that is the Aryan god. Because to people in the Indus civilization, they didn't need fire. Fire to them was something they used to cook. Whereas to the Aryans, it was very important because without fire, they didn't have warmth. So everything was based on fire and the sun. Right? Because the sun is what gave them a good day the next day. At night, the steppes is going to be really, very cold. So the fire is what actually gave them warmth and made the children survive. Right? And the Vaishyas were basically the mercantile class, moneylenders, craftsmen, landowners. it takes a long time to learn the trade, right? Below the priest, there were other smaller priests who were sub-priest class, who were supposed to do, penance and all of that. But that was much more easier jobs. Then you had the Sudra, right? The Sudra was basically doing menial jobs like cobblers, leather workers, right? Things that the Brahmins or the priests thought was very unclean, right? So you must start to understand that it was an older system being synthesized with a new system. So these guys only knew about war. They just came in, war, plunder, war. So on one side you had communism, and what came in was capitalism. So the first thing that capitalism is going to do is, I want to plunder, I want it all. I want people to work for me. I want to enslave people. Alright, people should be placed in classes and they should accept whatever we give them. Not whatever is equal. What they think is equal is not none of our business. All we want is my race should be the king, right? And we should make more kings and more kings, and we should substitute this and start more kingdoms. And so they did, because as they spread across the Indo-Gangetic plain, you had a lot of kingdoms that started up and they fought between each other. So if you read the stories of Mahabharata, it's all about war and what they did during the war. It's like Leo Tolstoy writing about war and peace, for example. This is very common to other social hierarchical systems. The Egyptians used it, the Mesopotamians did it as well, and the Assyrians did it as well. Right? Okay, so in today's world, when you live in Malaysia or in America or the US, social mobility was one of the most important things. It means that you go to school, you go to university, you study well, and you get a position in one of the jobs, you can apply for it, whichever you want, depending on your qualification. Right, you are streamed. Right, so there's a very definite system in which you go to general school, then you go to a university, and then you are streamed. Those days they couldn't do it. There was no schools, there was no universities. Right, just a group of people, group of elders who basically sat down and said, I'll test you, I'll see your aptitude. Right, from that I'll decide what you're going to become, and I'll train you up. So if you are big built, right, you are big built and you had a sense or an aptitude for fighting, then I'll put you in the Kshatriya class and so on. And so they were placed into strict social positions because it was a very important requirement to fill positions, to make sure that all the positions, that you have enough armies, that you have enough workers on the fields to do the job. Right? Like example today, you have in Malaysia a problem in which we do not want to do jobs like being petrol pump attendants or workers in a restaurant, so on. So what happens? You have an influx of people from outside, which is Bangladeshis or Indonesians and so on. And this migration that happens will eventually overtake the jobs of the locals. Right? So likewise, they had to fit everybody into a position so that they didn't allow outsiders to come in, people become lazy, and then the nation does not flourish. Okay? So the story is, under the Aryan caste system, this is called Purusha. Purusha is basically the god that was created, the progenitor of mankind. This is the story that they say, the progenitor of mankind. Everybody came from this creature called Purusha. And Purusha and mankind was created by dividing Purusha into 4 parts. Right? Naturally, the Brahmins or the priests or the more intelligent class took the mouth or the head. The Kshatriyas were the arms of this Purusha. The Vaishyas were the legs and the Shudras were the feet. In this way, they were not talking about separate parts of the body and saying, you are the legs so I don't respect you. Well, I'm the head of that. I'm better off because I'm the head. It's more respectable position. They were talking about the harmony of these groups come together so that they can all work together. Right? Imagine if you do not have one leg, it will be quite difficult to work, or one leg in one hand. There will be imbalance in how you're going to run your country. So if you look at the top-down structure, top-down from the priests, to them, if these people work, we will be all okay. Just like bureaucrats today, right? Most of us know that they don't do any work up there. They just attend parties, go and give speeches, and so on. They don't actually do labor, right? But without these people laboring, these guys don't have money to spend. Okay? So they give a bit off here and basically enjoy more up here. And to be able to always enjoy that, not only them but their children and their future generation, then you have a closed system, which means that you guys are not allowed to go up here. Once you are born, it is done, it is set, right? Except for some exceptions, right? In the early stages, there were some exceptions where you can intermarry. The guys at the top can marry ladies at the bottom, right? It went one way. Men marrying women, not the other way around, right? High-class women were not allowed to marry the low-class guys, right? So in that way, they also utilize the women of certain societies by promising them bliss or whatever that they wanted to experience, or moksha. So they created certain terms like Dharma. You find that word a lot in many cultures. Dharma, in Buddhism, is called Dharma, which means duty, right? Then you have karma, right? Consequence. And then you had moksha, which is the ultimate enlightenment of what you are supposed to look for in life. Not money, right? So what the priest said to these guys, you guys should not be looking for money. You should not ask for more money. Just work on the fields and we will teach you something that you can achieve moksha, either by rebirth. If you do good things and you don't hurt us, or you don't rebel against us, then you will earn a better life in your next life. So it's the art of postponement. Okay? So the guys at the top are very smart in doing that. Now in caste you have two values. The word caste itself comes from the Portuguese word casta, right? In Sanskrit it's called varna, which is basically the color. So they mainly differentiated on the color of the skins to say that most of you are stereotyped to be in this particular field. So varna refers to the religious concept that every individual is born with a unique set of tendencies. This is quite contemporary as well, because when you go into HR firms, you still find people who have certain temperaments. Right? A manager has to have a certain temperament. Right? A general worker should have a certain temperament to just do work and not ask questions. Right? So likewise, they went on temperaments and tendencies of the person by identifying them at a young age. Right? Or at a certain age, it was useful for them to ascertain whether this person is good for this job or that job. Right? Commonly, if you see communism, it's the same way. Right? And jati refers to a social concept of occupation. So when you went into a certain occupation, there was not much occupations. Those days were basically jewelers and people who went, carpenters, people who were barbers, shoemakers, right? Cow herds, goat herds, people who dealt with milk, people who dealt with food. All of this had a certain jati, to place them in that order and give them a certain amount of cartelship, which means you have a cartel, you don't have to worry about your job is always secure, right? Job security. Okay, the merits of the caste system. Now I'm going to talk about merits of caste system in ancient times, because they didn't have schools, they didn't have governments. It was a very prototype stage of governments, not as complex as what we have today with the technology and the amount of needs that people have. The caste system allowed you to preserve your culture or your tribe, because generally people are very tribal. Indians basically came from a very tribal root. So the tribalness always was there. So preservation of culture, this will pass on from generation to generation along with jobs. Yeah? So what the father did, the division of labor, when the father died, here I teach my son. Right? It still goes on in Chinese culture. For example, the father learns a trade, let's say a chicken rice seller, he has a good chicken rice shop, right? He's got a business which attracts about 100 people a day. At the end of his life, at about 55, he has several children. He said, I only have one shop. So what do I do? I said, well, which of you here want to take over? So there's a ritual that the son has to do to see whether he's worthy enough to be passed on the knowledge of just knowing how to fry the chicken. Right? After which he gets the shop and he pays the rent to the father. Right? And he gets to run the shop. So this is apprenticeship. Right? And that is what they all had. There was no universities where you can go to and get certificates or buy certificates for that matter. Right? And end up in a job somewhere in the city. There was no city. And India was divided into small villages. Right? Small villages, small they call it jillas and small townships. Right? It was not big cities like Putrajaya or Kuala Lumpur. Right? So in every area they wanted to have, if there was one baker in one area, he would have at least a radius of 5 kilometers, customers from 5 kilometers only visiting him. So he conquered that area. Right? So eventually you had bakers, but then they were placed not in one area, spread out to be sufficient enough for the society that was needing it. Increased professional proficiency because it accumulated experience over the years. The father to son system, right? Turun temurun, as you say that, right? So these are specialized skills like even jewelry. So if you see in the caste system, you have the patters. The patters were jewelers. So from father to son, they would learn how to make good gold, the proportions of gold. This was trade secrets, right? As you see, trade secrets are very important. So this was already a trading culture, and to maintain the caste system was to also maintain the trade secrets. Right? Like KFC today has a trade secret which they do not reveal. Coca-Cola has a trade secret. It's a very big thing because they are all worldwide today. But those days, to protect the trade secret of how to get the best pottery, for example, the best metal, right? The best wheat or the best outgrowth, you had a trade secret. Where do you get the seeds? What kind of soil do you grow? Right? All of this has become specializations now. Geologists, planters, and so on. You had also the increased cooperation with castes, between castes, and absence of competition. You had a justice system called a panchayat system. The preservation of purity, right? One of the main things that population wanted that was the ratio of females to males, right? So today you have a social problem where Malaysian girls marry foreigners, especially foreigners who come in to do jobs outside, in restaurants or whatever. And this creates a social problem, which means the ratio of females that you have within your group of people to choose from reduces. And it creates a social inequality, perceivable social inequality. Of course, Chinese would like to marry the Chinese girl, but if the Chinese girl doesn't like Chinese boys, they'd like to have probably a guy from Germany or US. No, the Chinese guy will feel, where are the girls? Where are my girls? I was born into this community with an idea of that I will have, when I come to a certain age, I will have enough girls, but I do not have Chinese girls now, or Indian girls for that matter. Right? And health and social life, protected society, permanency and continuity. And the life that went on, social life, was not dependent on any sort of political upheaval. They can go on by themselves. So it's like a local government. Yeah? A local government, like you see Penang government today doing stuff in Penang, but they are a local government. So even if federal wants to say anything, they say we don't care about you, we will just control whatever we do in our area, we don't have to take instructions from you. So that was how it was. So it's a kind of nation building, an ancient nation building which was skewed and misinterpreted as ancient or racist by the British. Okay. So a caste is like a corporation. It makes the members feel they belong to the same body, highly conscious of their group identity. They also have protection and patronage, right, from the caste. It's like a gang, for example. Why do people join gangs, for example? They have the protection and the patronage of a common king, right? And you have ancestral temples or shrines where they are able to congregate, meet, eat, right? Have a good laugh, get married, for example, in the midst of people, and so on. So these are the number of castes that you have. These are some of the castes. There are other sub-castes as well. Okay. So these are the different types of castes that you have. Although there are a lot, only a few of them came to Malaysia. These are generally in India, not in Malaysia. Right, so you have the Adi Dravida. This was actually, Adi Dravida was the term Paraya. Right, most of you would have heard the term Paraya because it's used generally as a derogatory term for anybody for that matter. Right, it becomes colloquial, even the English use it. But it was asked to be changed by that group of people into Adi Dravida. Adi means the Dravidians from the beginning. Right? So they call themselves this. So if you have here, most of them, you have the Chettiar here. So you have Chettiar came from here. You have the Lalas. You have the Ayers who are here. Some of them, you have the Pillays who are here also. You have Nayars who are the Malayali people, the Raos, and a few other groups. Okay. Now with all these groups happening, the biggest thing that happened was this. The British came in, and we'll have a short video.
For 200 years, Britain was the most powerful nation in the world. From Canada to India, from Australia to Nigeria, from the Caribbean to South Africa, the British Empire once ruled over a third of the people on Earth. Newly discovered film, all in original color, reveals how the British viewed their imperial possessions. 1906, Trooping the Colour for Edward VII, the zenith of imperial pride and pomp. 1919, a parade in Paris to celebrate the end of the First World War. Victory brought new riches, but exposed a vulnerable empire. Personal letters and diaries describe the experiences of the rulers and the ruled.
The British flag never flew over a more powerful or united an empire than now. Never did our voice count for more in determining the future destinies of mankind.
Why do I regard British rule as a curse? It has impoverished the young millions. It has reduced us politically to serfdom. It has sapped the foundations of our culture.
Britain's imperial history is a story of contradiction, discovery and progress, prejudice and oppression. London's Petticoat Lane. This remarkable film captures the essence of Britain and her people. By 1926, the British have emerged from the First World War, tired but triumphant. Their new possessions span 1 million square miles. Britain still has a passion for colonial rule and a desire to improve the lives of her subjects.
The British government in India has not only deprived the Indian people of their freedom, but has based itself on the exploitation of the masses and has ruined India. We believe that India must sever the British connection and attain complete independence.
But imperial zealots are horrified at the prospect of relinquishing the Raj. Viscount Brotherby.
British rule in India is irreplaceable. It has been bought by British lives and built up by British capital. If we had not gone to India, she would still be in a state of semi-barbaric anarchy. Our duty there is not to argue with base agitators, but to govern.
Less than 100,000 British rule 315 million Indians. Marjorie Usher is governess to the children of an army colonel in Chakrata.
Entertainment in this country is very simple. You just tell the servants how many are coming and they see to everything. We have 9 servants, including the ayah, the head servant, who acts as valet to Colonel Sterling, the kitmutgar, who waits at table and looks after the silver, and the dhobi, or washerman, who does our clothes very well indeed.
While the British enjoy the luxuries of the Raj, most of their Indian subjects live in dire poverty. Masami Amar.
The British Raj impose taxes for everything. What are these taxes? Is it to suck out our lifeblood? Or plunder us for our money and make us living corpses? Look into a railway carriage. There is breathing space for a gunny sack, but not for a man. It was in a train like this that my friend Mopillai died of suffocation.
British India is divided into 7 provinces with many languages and religions. Violence between Hindus and Muslims is commonplace. Nationalists blame the British for a policy of divide and rule.
Now that's a short video. We'll go on with it. Make it short. So, with the British, the last 200 years of British, this is when most of the South Indians or Indians from India or South Asia came into the British East India Company, right? With the advent of the Industrial Revolution, Britain just needed to pump in more into the system. Britain became the workshop for the world, just like how China is today the workshop for the world. Britain was at that time in 1940, during this age, the 1800s to 1945, the workshop of the world. Fridge, whatever that was coming from Britain, cars, electrical goods, all of them came from Britain. And British needed a lot of wool and cotton, food, salvatry for their ammunition. They were fighting World War II, right? And so on. So this was basically again England in the 1700s, and once the Industrial Revolution started, all basically again you had suddenly a lot of poverty in India because a lot of India's industries were cottage industries. Right? The early part of India was about cottage industries, not industrialized factories and so on. And even if they had open industrialized factories, they only needed 1,000 people to run the factories, not 10,000 people or 100,000 people. And where all these people who had crafts and cottage industries, they became very poor. So the fulcrum in which Indian emigration to the distant British colonies like Malaya and Singapore was a question of overpopulation, which was created by the British and of course by the preceding monarchies and so on. India had about 300 million people at the time, right? With the rapid expansion of the population and also the Industrial Revolution coming in, and in 1807, the British Parliament said no to slavery. Before this, the big thing was slavery, right? America was built on slavery. A lot of other nations were built on slavery, right? Which means that the white race basically came and said all other races which were not of white skin now are inferior. They should be treated as animals, and they should be made to work. You don't have to give them any pay. Just put them in some houses, right? Give them some food, right? Do whatever you want with them. We don't care as long as we have production output, right? That's good for you. I give you a promotion, right? That was what the British attitude was. If you saw the video just now, that is what they were, right? To them, it was more of what the Aryans thought in the early days. The white race is a supreme race. We are more civilized than these people, right? So with extreme poverty, you had all of them moving towards Malaya. Of course, you had Singapore, you had Jamaica as well. You had people in Guyana, sugar plantations. You had coffee plantations. The first ones came in from India for coffee plantations. Coffee was a big thing then, right? Due to the parallel of South America and Malaya in terms of weather, they needed tropical weather to grow coffee, right? Rubber, gambir, pepper, for example, all the spices. And most of them came in the 1800s in small trickles. So you had the Tamils, the Malayalam, the Telugu, the Bengali, the Gujaratis, Punjabis, the small Tamils. Now, as I said earlier, India is not a single country. India is made up of many countries, for example. The South Indian identifies so much with South India and not with any other state. Right? It's just like Kelantan. Right? People of Kelantan say, this is my life, this is how I live. Right? I don't live like Lakans. Lakans are different, Johorians are different. Just as the Sultan of Johor says today, we are Bangsa Johor. We are not Malaysians. We are Bangsa Johor. We have certain rules, we have certain ways of life. So don't interfere in our lives. And so everybody had the distinctive culture, language, skin color, food culture, marriage culture, right? The caste system as well. All of that came here. But with no money, there's no caste. You understand? No money, no caste. I can't exercise caste rights and I want this, I want that because I'm poor. Right? So basically caste is more of a class difference that appears when you have money. So we'll see at the end of this discourse what's going to happen when people have money. Right? So the early Indians were all friendly bands of brothers, right? Bands of brothers coming together. They were cheated basically. Okay? And this is the indenture document. Right? They actually had to sign a document, and most of these people were illiterate. So the British used law to circumnavigate, to navigate through the English Parliament passing the law in 1807 that say there's no more slavery, you cannot engage in slavery anymore. So what the British did was, they launched this called Indentured Labor. They would go to an Indian village where it had a lot of poor people, and they'll give them an advance to settle their debts. But in order for that, it's more like aloma, giving money, right? And basically asking them to work for 5 years. Right? They will pay them a small salary, but they have to sign this document saying that they agree to work for 5 years. This is a tenure for them. 5 years in this land, 5 years in Jamaica, 5 years. But some of them were told 5 years in India, in some other state. They said, okay, India is okay, fine. They didn't know they're going to get on a ship and go to Malaysia. Okay? So some of them didn't want to go out because they didn't know what was outside of India or the conditions. So if you see here, what the British did was, through their census, they created record name, and caste. So you have here Musulman. Musulman is basically an Indian Muslim. Right? They were the poorest of the class because of the racial discrimination that was subjected to them due to the Hindu majority India. Right? Okay. So the British kept really good records, and this is what created the caste system earlier by dividing the Indian population, right, into who can do what and so on. And then suddenly the consciousness of, oh, I'm this caste, I can do this job, you cannot do that job. Right? So what the British did was tell, let's say, a Musulman, they had a Kangani system or the Tandal system. A guy will say, hey, you're my friend, right? I know you for a long time, I have a place, there's a job for you. Why don't you come? We are both, of same caste, I won't cheat you. Right? And these guys took people on boats and left them. It's quite similar to what you see in today's immigration with the Indians. Most of them are left at the airport without passports, and the agent runs away. And who is normally the agent? A person who they know very closely back home. Okay? So this kind of trade was happening at the time, and the term race had become dominant in the British census. So the creation of ethnic labels carries the signature of British power to simplify cultural explanations and justify colonial dominance as a superior race. This is the Malaysia census. Sorry, you can't see this, it's small. We'll zoom it in for you. This is the census they took of Malaya. This is in 1871. These are all the people that were here in Malaya. Okay. So they took census 1871, 1881, 1891. So they divided people into all of this, right? Today if you go into the Malaysian application form for any government role, you either have Malay, Chinese or Indian. Right? They simplified it to Indian. So what happens when you have differences in, for example, the population of different Indians? Because there was no such thing as Indian. There were Tamilians, there were Malayalis, there were Telugus, there were Punjabis. So when you group them up together as Indians, you will have that the dominant group among all of this will take more of the share. Right? And in that way, they created infighting, right? Or intra-group friction, right? And this was basically the principle of divide and rule. Let them take care of their own problems, they're fighting with themselves, so at least each and everyone will try to outdo each other to prove to me that they can do something better. Right? So this is 1871, 1880. You see? Now, as you get to 1921, you find that still you have a lot of races coming through. Okay, Malays, for example, were classified into so many different races because they came from Java. As you go through time, 1931, 1947, still you had the Sikh, the Bengali, the Gujarati, the Marathi, the Marwari, Pathan, Punjab, all of this from India. You don't find this anymore in our application forms. There is no separate race as Punjabi. Everybody was collected together. There's no Telugu, there's no Malayali. And post-independence, what happened was simplification. So you find that all other groups from Palembang were all grouped as Malays, leaving the Indonesians, the Aborigines, Semais and all of that as separate races, right, as Orang Asli. The Chinese still had their clans. As we went on, still you had all of these caste issues. So as an Indian, you have the Indian Tamil, Malayali, Telugu, Sikh, other Punjabi, other Indian, Pakistani, Bangladesh. So they reduced it to certain groups. By 1957, in 1957, the Swanis didn't want to be identified as Tamils. They wanted to be identified as lion. Okay. Then when it came to 70s, they said, okay, fine, we will go back to Tamils because the quota was not there. Right? The group of 99 had so much of so many other races in there that they had to compete amongst each other. Okay. What are caste relations like now in Malaysia? With independence and the improvement of literacy rate, among Indians, the education system has imbibed this to people over time, not very quickly, as people gradually started to come out of the villages and estates and increase urbanization. Today you have society, they have eradicated, in the early days, 70s and 80s, people eradicated any sort of identification with race or caste. Indians was, you can intermarry, everybody went for the same job, although there were nuances of certain discrimination between castes, right? But the education system did not recognize it. Unlike India, where you have a reservation system for the lower class. First they say we want to eradicate caste system, and then they say we want to put a reservation system, right? So it's actually destroying it because you are now creating a separate class of people who are, and it's just gone on for the last, 67 years. 67 years it's been going on, and still you have caste problems. You still have a lot of people killing each other in India. You have women being raped because they are low caste, they deserve to die, which we do not have here. We do not have lynch mobs going around killing others. Or villagers burning their daughters or whatever because they married outside the caste. Okay? India still has that. This is all because education has improved it. Right? Because once you are equal on education, you are on par, you are able to defend yourself. You are able to say, I can work as hard as you and get the same money as you, so I don't have to worry about caste or all of that. The move of urbanization and the growing middle class. Urbanization has destroyed the feeling of caste system. So you can live together in cities and not ghetto in certain areas. Say I'm a lower caste, I'm poor, I don't have anything. So the government has said, look, close all the estates and bring the Indians out of the estates because this is creating a lot of social problems. They are ghettoing themselves in there. And a lot of murders happening. They come out from there, come to the urban areas and steal and go back. And so somewhere in the 80s, alongside with Mahathir's policies, most of the estates were closed down. Today you don't have Indians in the estate as much as you did before. You now have Indonesians and Bangladeshis in the estates. Right? You have a new wave of migrants coming in, which are Indonesians, Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, of different areas of work. For example, people who come from India can only work in restaurants. And the become barbers, for example. That's the two things that they're giving. The rest, no way. Right? Pakistanis are coming in at a more higher skill level for welding, right? In the oil and gas industries, right? These are more of the dirty, dangerous, and demeaning jobs which most Malaysians don't want to do because they have too much of money in their hands. So they have actually now created a super class of people who don't want to even wipe a table at a coffee shop, even if it's their own. As far as marriages are concerned, you have much more inter-caste and interracial marriages now, right? Which is, it depends, yeah? Of course, we have a still very exclusive society, very inclusive. The Chinese want to marry Chinese, and even within Chinese, you have certain clans who want to marry certain clans. Same with the Gujaratis. But today, it's come to a point that the Gujarati doesn't mind, marrying a Tamil boy, for example. 50 years ago, that was taboo, right? The whole family will come in and basically choke the daughter or say, why are you doing this? Kidnap the daughter and everything. But today, it's okay because the guy drives a BMW, the Tamil boy, fine, he's got his own business, and good. So it's become more acceptable. It's all about class. If you're able to come up to the level of class, you're able to behave yourself with a certain temperament, in a classy way, yeah, fine. Why not? Right? So people are experimenting with it and so on. Just like how the Chinese have that and the Malays